Good morning, boys and girls. It's Monday morning. Remember, I told you on Friday I was going to Google uh, the fisher as an animal, and it is a real animal. It's of the weasel family. Well, they usually weigh about 13 pounds and they're kind of long and narrow. They are carnivorous. And guess what? They're one of the very few animals that eat porcupines. So, chapter 19, In Search of Food. When Ereth reached the den, the three foxes were sitting side by side near the entryway. Suddenly, uncomfortable, Ereth gazed at them. Nimble and Flipped returned his look. Tumble avoided eye contact altogether. For a moment, no one said anything. It was Nimble who called, "Hey, Ereth, where have you been?" "Out," Ereth said, "walking." "Oh, see anything interesting?" "No." And there was silence. "Listen here," Ereth snapped, "you tasteless tubs of toad twaddle. If you think..." Hearing himself, Ereth paused, cleared his throat, and began again. "What I mean is that if you willow wallows think I'm going to do all the work while you loaf and soak up the sun like a bunch of cross-eyed octopuses..." "No, I didn't mean that. What would you like us to do?" Flip said. "Chores, hunt, clean up? Whatever you say, Ereth. We'll be glad to do it." "How about making some more snowballs?" Ereth continued testily. "Start strolling them along the base of the bluff. Then go across the field in any direction you want. Just stay behind the balls. Do you understand? Behind. If there are any trails you and your mother used a lot, make sure you roll the balls those ways. Any questions? Problems? None. Good. Then get going." Yapping and braying, the foxes hurried down along the trails they had already made, packed up some new snowballs, and began to roll them in different directions. When the three foxes returned to the den and Ereth, they were exhausted but elated. "We found 3 more traps," Nimble cried with glee as she bounded up the bluff. "Fine," Ereth said. "Good, we're making progress. It won't be long before you've found them all. We just need to search some more." "Ereth," it was Tumble who spoke. "What?" "We're really starving." "Mom always brought home lots," Nimble added plaintively. "More than we could eat," Flip agreed. "More?" Ereth's ears perked up. "There were times," Tumble said, "she brought us rabbits so big we couldn't even finish everything." "What happened to the extras?" Ereth asked. "Did she take them off and eat the rest herself?" He knew that's what he would have done. Flip shook his head. "Mom said dinner time was family time, that it was rude to go off and eat alone. So we always ate together." "Then where did she put the leftovers?" The foxes looked at one another in puzzlement. "I guess we don't know," Nimble said with a shrug. "She just did what she did." "Do you think she could have stored them somewhere?" Ereth asked. "She never mentioned still having another den? You know, an emergency storehouse?" She never said," Flip replied. A frustrated Ereth turned to look over the field. "If there was a storage den with food, it would make all the difference in the world. The problem was such a place was likely to be well hidden. It could be anywhere. He turned back to the waiting kids. There must be one. I think we'd better go look for it, he said. The point is, I can't teach you anything about hunting, but you need food, so think hard. Did your mother ever hint about another place? Nope, Nimble said. Okay, Ereth said. Then here's what we're going to do. We've got those trails you made. Instead of looking for traps, go back along them. Keep your noses to the ground. Sniff, smell, see if you can find a storehouse. But whatever you do, don't go off the safe trails. If you think you smell something, come back and we'll investigate together. The kids needed no further encouragement. They bounded off, each one going in a different direction. As he waited, Ereth scrutinized the field, trying to guess where, if he were to build a secret storehouse, he might put it. Then he craned around to look behind him. At the crest of the bluff in particular, which rose up some 5 feet over his head, he doubted if the kits would even think of looking there. A shrewd mother like Leaper, knowing that, might well put a storehouse in just such an out-of-the-way spot. Ereth eyed the area carefully, trying to figure out a way he could haul himself to the top. It was steep, but as he looked around, he noted that not very far from where he sat was a natural cleft worn into the face of the bluff. If he could work his way up to that cleft, he should be able to get beyond the bluff. Still, he hesitated. What about traps? There were still 6 to be uncovered. So far, however, they had all been along the base of the bluff, in the forest, or out in the field. That suggested they wouldn't be beyond the bluff. Maybe. Ereth looked over the field. The kits remained hard at work. Should he tell them what he was doing? No, it would take too long. Besides, it would be a lot more enjoyable to greet them with news of his discovery, if he made one. Ereth headed for the cleft. Working his way across the bluff, it was not easy to reach. First, there was snow with which to contend. Then, too, the face of the bluff was studded with rocks and boulders, all of which slowed him down. More than once, Ereth needed to stop and rest. Once he reached the lower end of the cliff, he started up clawing and scratching at the loose gravel and snow. Twice he had to stop, panting heavily, but when he pulled himself over the final bit, he faced a stand of pine trees. His heart skipped a beat. Food, trailing drools of spit, and ignoring all caution, he ran right towards the trees. Upon reaching the pines, he attacked them with nothing less than savagery, ripping away the outer layers of bark to get at and gnaw at the sweet underbark. After 20 minutes of nonstop eating, Ereth felt so stuffed, so crammed full of food, he had to rest and allow himself to digest his meal. Then, with a start, he recalled his original mission: food for the kids. He sat up and looked about. The first thing he realized was that there was enough trees in the area to keep him satisfied for a long time. That is to say, his food problem had been solved. Excuse me. But where, he asked himself again. Goodness. If he were a fox, would he place a secret den? Let's think about that a minute while I take a drink. Ereth searched among the trees. The ground was hard, frozen in spots, though without many rocks. The snow was sparse here, and he was able to make his way with relatively ease. Still, there didn't seem to be any logical place for a secret den. Then he noticed, within a tightly woven grove of trees, a large pile of rocks. He lumbered over to it and eyed it with care, searching for a hole or anything to suggest an entry to an inner cache of food. But though he walked completely around the pile, he saw nothing that even hinted at it. He was about to move on when he decided he should climb atop the pile. Perhaps, though he doubted it, he might see something more from up there. He clambered up the rocks. It was not easy, and he kept swearing to himself. Then, as he climbed higher, he began to detect the smell of something distinctly unpleasant. Ereth reached the top of the pile, and suddenly the smell of meat was more than pungent. Poking about the top, he found a hole. It was not a very large hole, but when he put his nose to it, he had to jump back. So repellent was the stench. It was the stink of meat. A lot of meat. Excited now, Ereth scratched about the hole, trying to enlarge it. The edges gave away quickly as if they had been put loosely packed in the first place. Very soon, Ereth was able to poke his head down into a larger, bigger hole. What Ereth saw in the dim light made him blink. The pile of rocks enclosed an entire storeroom of food. Partially eaten rabbits, voles, chipmunks, and even, to his horror, mice. All were frozen. It was if he had what he had guessed and hoped. Ledger had carefully provided emergency rations for her family to last for a good part of the winter. No one would starve. Caught between total revulsion and complete glee, Ereth wheeled about and dashed back towards the bluff and the foxes. "Bouncing bear burps," he cried. "I found it. We're saved." He was so excited he hardly noticed he was using the word we. Chapter 20, Bounder. Toward the other end of Dimwood Forest was a small, shallow glen, all but circular in shape. The hollow was surrounded by tall ponderosa pines, their heavy limbs bent with snow. Near the center of the place, like the hub of a wheel, was a rock. Atop the rock, bathing in the warm sun beneath the blue sky, was a large, handsome fox. It was Bounder, father of the 3 kids. Head high, majestically tail curled about his body, Bounder was in perfect repose. His coat of ruby red fur was as thick as summer grass. His paws were powerful. His noble face, long and pointed, bore deepest eyes and sharp whiskers. Indeed, he was quite prepared to believe that the rock upon which he rested and even the sun in the sky were there for him. so as to show him at best advantage. All that was missing was a pool of water in which he might admire his own image. A few days ago, Bounder had heard a rumor that the humans at New Farm, at the eastern end of Dimwood Forest, had built a brand new chicken coop. The coop was full of plump chickens, or so the fox had been informed. With visions of many tasty meals in his future, the fox was determined to visit the coop. Just thinking about it made him lick his lips in anticipation. For Bounder did what he wanted, how he wanted, when he wanted. It was only the snowstorm that had interrupted his journey. Though the storm was now over and he was still planning to go, the soothing sun upon his back detained him. The warmth provided such sweet contentment. He had shut his eyes and given himself over to random thoughts. Even as the fox's eyes were shut, his ears were working, listening to the sounds of the forest, on guard for the slightest hint of any disturbance to which he should attend. As time went by, he caught the sound of a mouse burrowing under the snow. Bounder decided the mouse was not big enough for him to bother with. Not long after that, he was certain a baby rabbit was hopping by the rock. Though the fox knew the rabbit was easy prey, once again he decided that the animal's small size did not justify making any effort to catch it. It was his awareness of the young rabbit, however, that caused him to think momentarily about his wife, Leaper, and the 3 kits, Nimble, Tumble, and Flip. Regarding Leaper, Bounder had no great depth of feeling. When he thought of her, it was to acknowledge that she was a good mother to these kits of his. That, as far as he was concerned, was the only thing important about her. For Leaper's good mothering meant that he, Bounder, did not have to concern himself very much with his youngsters. That in turn allowed him to go about his business freely, without the least hindrance, and so he did. As for the kits, he did care for them, but on his own terms. He enjoyed visiting them from time to time. He liked to bring them special treats, like a freshly killed chicken, something their mother would not risk providing. He also enjoyed engaging the kits in a bit of rough play, just enough to let them experience his strength. But what Bounder liked most in regard to his kits was to allow his children to gaze upon him with adoring eyes. Once that was accomplished, he would go off again on his private business. All that, in Bounder's opinion, was the proper life for a father fox. So it was that as the fox continued to lie beneath the warm sun, he deliberately dismissed thoughts of home and family. Life was too good for him to be disturbed by such things. But when Bounder heard the sound of something much larger than a baby rabbit, opening his orange eyes a little, he sought out who it might be. There, on a branch, on one of the trees, looking over the glen, was Marty the Fisher. As soon as the fox realized it was Marty, he shut his eyes again. Bounder did not like Marty. As far as the fox was concerned, the fisher was an unpleasant creature, sly, secretive, not always to be trusted. "Hello, Bounder," Marty called out. "Do you know what is happening?" The fox said nothing. "Well, then," the fisher said, "my guess is that you don't want to know what's happened to your wife, Leaper, and those 3 kits of yours who go by the names Tumble, Nimble, and Flip." Bounder felt uneasy. By stating the fox's family's name, Marty had aroused his curiosity. Still, the last thing the fox wanted to do was to ask for the story. That would put someone else in control, a thing Bounder did not like to happen. He preferred to be in charge. When the fox neither moved nor replied, Marty called, "It's a pretty tragic tale, Bounder. I don't blame you for not wanting to know." Bounder continued to act with indifference. "But then," Marty continued loudly, "since everyone else knows what happened, I suppose you do too. Yes, I guess you were the first one to hear. Well, Bounder, you do have my sympathy." Bounder, no longer able to resist, turned to Fisher. "I beg your pardon? Were you talking to me?" He was very vexed, but worked hard to avoid showing it. "Of course I was talking to you," Marty cried. "And you heard everything I said, didn't you? You foxes have a great reputation for listening. I suppose you're as good as most, maybe better." Bounder sniffed loudly a few times. "Listening," he said. "Actually, my hearing hasn't been very good lately. A kind of cold or something. The snowstorm, I suspect. Even so, if you have something to say to me, I'd be happy to make an effort to hear it." Marty studied Bounder intently with his dark, emotionless eyes, trying to make up his mind if the fox was telling the truth or not. He decided he was not, and that annoyed him. "It's your wife, Leaper," he said bluntly. "She's been killed." "Killed?" Bounder cried, taken aback, but under such self-control that he remained in place. "You're lying." "No, it's true. By a hunter's steel trap near the cabin at Long Lake. It happened just yesterday during the snowstorm." "What about my kits? Were they hurt?" "Oh no, they weren't with her." "Do they know about her?" "I'm not sure." Now Bounder was concerned. "Tell me everything you know." "All I know is that an old porcupine who goes by the name Ereth is staying with your kits." "Ereth? That's him. He seems to have moved into your den." "In my den?" Bounder cried. "With my kits?" "I think so." Bounder knew all about Ereth. If anything, he knew him too well. Little more than a year ago, he had been chasing a mouse through the forest when she ran into a hollow log to escape. The log proved to be Ereth's home. Though all Bounder had wanted to do was to eat the mouse, porcupines, he knew, were not meat eaters. Ereth had slapped him with his tail, giving him a nose full of painful quills. So yes, Bounder knew all about Ereth. He disliked him intensely. "Those are my kits," the fox growled. "That porcupine has no business with them. None. What's he doing there?" "I think," Marty the fisher said, "he's pretending to be their father." "Their father?" Bounder exclaimed. "Are you making any of this up?" "Not in the least. And quite a happy family they've become. That's all I know." So saying, Marty the fisher retreated among the branches of the tree. He was deep enough for Bounder to lose sight of him, but not so far away that he could not watch the fox. Bounder was thinking hard about what he had heard. Could it really be true, he asked himself? If true, it was a dreadful thing that had happened to Leaper. He truly regretted it, he did. But at least his kits were safe and being cared for. As far as Bounder was concerned, that was the most important thing. Regarding Ereth the porcupine, Bounder grinned. It served that old porcupine right for being such a busybody. What a perfect revenge on Ereth, the old porcupine taking care of his kits, acting like their father. Until, of course, he dismissed him. The more Bounder thought about it, the more it pleased him that his old foe should be stuck with the job of taking care of his children. Served the porcupine right. Moreover, it meant that he, Bounder, could get on with his business of catching the chickens from the coop at New Farm. With that thought, Bounder trotted off through the snow, his mind entirely on those plump chickens. "Good," Marty the fisher said to himself as he watched Bounder go off. "If I know Bounder, he'll get Ereth away from those kits. And when the porcupine is alone again, I'll be there waiting for him." Okay, we have finished reading today, and I still don't know what's going to happen with the fisher and Ereth. He's definitely a patient animal to wait all this time, so we'll read tomorrow and see what happens. Bye.